Quinn,
Yes.
how exhausted are you this week?
Not that exhausted considering I had like 3 tests.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's quite the feat. I am very, 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 very exhausted.
Oh no, last night you were in such good spirits.
I did not sleep well.
Oh.
I had a nightmare that was mostly just me reading the dictionary. So,
All right.
yeah.
That's
I don't know why it was a nightmare, because all I can remember is reading the dictionary, but I remember not having a good time.
I mean, that doesn't sound like a fun thing to do.
But it doesn't sound like nightmare fuel, right? Like,
It depends on how long the dictionary is, I think.
I mean, but like I wasn't trying to read it comprehensively. It was just like me sitting there for a while reading the dictionary.
Huh, okay.
Yeah.
That's weird.
This is a show that we have decided to call Zoo.Q. I am Zero, you are Quinn.
That is frequently correct.
Frequently. I don't want to know. And we are going to dive right in with the weekly roundup.
And what a weekly roundup it will be.
What a weekly roundup it will be. Actually, do you want to go first?
I probably should, since I'm the one with like the actual...
With the actual like serious story, and
Yeah.
I'm the one with the goofs.
Serious first, then goofs. We'll earn the goofs.
Okay, we'll earn the goofs.
So, and this is like a little bit old, but we didn't have an episode last week, so we're kind of playing catch up with the nerd news here. We got like a full size trailer for Spider-Man Homecoming,
We did.
which is, I think, the Marvel movie I'm most excited about this year. Like even more than Guardians 2.
I would not go that far.
Yeah, well, I think it's mostly just because I think this represents the potential for the first good Spider-Man movie we've had since Spider-Man 2.
That's fair.
Like, we've had a good Guardians movie recently.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited about Guardians 2 because we get a little baby Groot.
I know, I'm excited about that too, but I'm also excited about Spider-Man because Spider-Man was up until like middle of high school when the movies got really bad. Spider-Man was always like my favorite superhero. So I'm excited for there to be good Spider-Man movies again. And especially because they're pulling from bad guys that I liked in the show, because I used to watch the old 90s show a lot. Mm-hmm. So like Vulture, and like I'm 99% sure I saw Shocker in the trailer. So like these kind of like weird D-list Marvel villains that are like, they look really cool in this trailer. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm if they do it right, I'll really like it in the movie. If they mess it up, it's going to be what ruins the movie for me. Is that it definitely seems to have like a trying to actually take responsibility after the events of Civil War, actually trying to train young heroes to be safe and not destructive. And I'm not, if they do it right, it'll be what makes the movie for me. If they do it wrong, it's going to be a bunch of Tony Stark whining on screen, and I'll probably walk out.
Because Tony Stark doing anything other than just kneeling down and apologizing to the audience is too much Tony Stark for you, right?
It's not even that. It's just like, and we'll keep this brief because
it's a whole thing.
It's like the single greatest point of contention in our entire relationship, I think, other than the
design of the Serenity and Firefly.
The design of the Firefly class ships in Firefly. Yeah, we once had a shouting match about that one. I think, especially Civil War, but the MCU in general, does Tony Stark a lot of injustice. And so like the reason I say it'll either make the movie or break the movie for me is that it'll either be us actually getting some character development out of Tony Stark and him not just being a whiny baby on screen, or it'll be him being a whiny baby and not understanding why people are upset at him for being a whiny baby. And it'll be like the worst hour and a half to 2 hours of cinema.
You just have like a really abrupt, like, I hate this movie switch, don't you?
Not for all movies and
just
like
Marvel
all
ones.
media. For Tony Stark heavy Marvel ones, yes.
Okay.
Like Tony Stark can really ruin a movie for me since like Iron Man 3.
So you did like Iron Man 1 to clarify?
I liked Iron Man 1 because like you got character development out of Tony. Mm-hmm. And then I liked Iron Man 2 because despite the fact that he seemed to start over from where he was at the beginning of Iron Man 1, or I'll say about the middle of Iron Man 1, you also got character development. And then in Iron Man 3, he seemed to start over from where he was at the beginning of Iron Man 2. and then we got character development, and then at Civil War he was awful again.
Yeah. So bringing it back to the trailer briefly.
Yeah, other than Tony Stark.
What I was going to say is, if you are excited for this movie and somehow have not seen the trailer, and like are someone who really cares about spoilers, do not watch this trailer. Allow me to be the hype man instead of the trailer, because the trailer gives you the whole plot. And seemingly even shots from the final fight, like revealing ones. So like I'm unless they do a really big zag in the film from the trailer, and this is like intentional misdirection, which I doubt because none of the Marvel trailers have done that. I know the plot of this movie.
Yeah.
Like I could write the 3-sentence summary right now.
Yeah. I will say from like the Civil War trailers, I felt that and part of it's because I think because Civil War was such a big ensemble movie, I felt like I fully understood one or two subplots from the trailers. I didn't understand the plot of the entire movie, and I think that this might be a similar vein. Like we have a pretty good idea. Okay, Spider-Man's fighting Vulture. Vulture's angry at Tony Stark, so on and so forth. And then we have Tony trying to protect Peter / raise him into superhero-dom. Mm-hmm. And so that's probably the two main kind of plots going on, but it's Marvel. They probably have like 14 other plots going on.
There's there's obviously gonna be like some sort of like Inhumans setup or something.
Yeah, there will be like several different like villain subplots going on, and
yeah. Well, Sony's making a Venom movie now, and I have no idea if that's supposed to be connected. So, yeah. Like I don't know if that's supposed to, because like at the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2, the worst Spider-Man, they had this set up for like they set it up and they announced it like briefly that they were going to make 6 Sinister Six movies. Like one for each of there was going to be like a Venom movie and a Dr. Octopus movie, and seemingly without much Spider-Man in them. And the Venom one seems to still be happening. The other ones all got canned.
I think you're the only person I've ever heard say Dr. Octopus. Like I think
that's you.
Yeah, like I think I've only ever heard Doc Ock before.
Okay. Well,
not the point, but
yeah, so like I have no idea where the Venom movie sits in relation to Spider-Man Homecoming, because I know those rights are shared. They're not exclusively Marvel's right now. So I have no idea what that's doing, but we might get hints to that. We might get hints to Infinity War. There'll be something else going on. So moving on to your thing that you found.
So my weekly
dear.
roundup story. So Pokemon, right?
Yes, a series that I'm a big fan of.
They've gotten kind of lazy recently.
No, they were always kind of lazy. There's one in the original games that's just some eggs.
Their laziness is especially evident recently.
I don't know. I liked a lot of the new ones.
So did I, but like at least Executor had like a good pun name and a reasonably sized neck. No, wait. Is that no? Executor is the pine tree one, the palm tree one.
Yeah.
Anyway, my point is, I'll say it seems to have gotten a lot more formulaic recently.
Yeah, that's fair.
So formulaic that research scientist Janelle Shane decided to test whether or not a neural network could learn how to generate Pokemon names and abilities.
Oh Lord.
And it didn't take very long for the neural network to figure it out.
Well, it does have like 700 plus data points to work with. So.
It does. And this story is coming from the Nerdist, so if you want to, look it up and see the drawings, which is what we'll get to in a minute.
Okay. So you say get to the drawings separately. Did the neural net make the drawings?
No. The neural network came up with names and abilities for the...
and for how many?
1, 2, 9. So this sort of example set that Shane released has 9.
Okay.
So then that got out into the world, and Lauren Iguanamouth Dawson, famous for being really good at drawing on Tumblr, drew them.
Okay.
She drew Pokemon for these different names and ability sets. So there are 9 of them. We're only going to go through a couple, but basically I'm going to read off the name and the abilities. You tell me what you think the Pokemon looks like.
All right.
Are you ready?
Okay, go for it.
The first Pokemon is Quincylax. Its abilities are Sturdy and Seen Grace.
Serene? Is it Serene
Nope,
Grace?
that's definitely a C.
Because Serene Grace is an ability.
No, it's Seen Grace.
That's okay. It made a new ability. That's unfair.
And its hidden ability is called Tongued Lose.
So it's not. Wait, it's not using real abilities.
Yeah, it's generating Pokemon names and abilities.
It should be generating names and assigning. Okay.
Anyway, what do you think this Pokemon looks like? Quincylax.
I think it's like a branched evolution from Munchlax. So like Munchlax evolves into Snorlax normally, right?
Yeah.
And with like a full instance, I think. So you give it like, however you get Lickitung to evolve into Lickalily, you give it that, and it gets like Lickitung attributes. So it's got like, it's like poofier, and it's got like a big tongue for that tongue lose ability or whatever that was.
It's a bird.
It's a bird?
It's just a boring bird sitting on a mango. And now, of course, I've given because I showed it.
Well,
to
I didn't
you.
really see that well. So
All right, one of my favorites, Staropter. Its ability is
Staraptor? That's already a Pokemon.
No. Staropter.
Is it a helicopter?
Staropter. Its abilities are Stinch and Stick Hat.
Like some of these are real abilities. Stench exists.
Yeah, that's how neural networks work, Quinn.
I know, but like I was somewhat misled on what this thing was supposed to be up to. But all right. Okay, well it's got to be like a helicopter because it's got opter at the end, right? It's probably got like 5 blades on top because star, like it's like a star-looking helicopter. It's like like a poison steel, perhaps.
So you're partially right. It definitely has like a 5 points theme going on. It's like neck frills are in the shape of a star, and like it has like 5 tail feathers, but it is a bird with a garbage bag over its head.
I'm beginning to doubt the artist's interpretations here.
All right, well,
Why are they all birds?
this one will make it super hard for you to doubt. The Pokemon is named Ronch, Ronch, and it has no abilities. Alternatively, it has an ability called None.
Okay, no, I've got it. I've got my idea here.
Okay.
So recently in Sun and...
You're already too complicated.
it's just a
Literally
circle?
a bottle of Hidden Valley Ranch. It's fantastic.
That... Okay, here's the thing. When this was pitched to me as like a segment, I was told... neural nets made Pokemon. See if you can figure out what they look like based on like the name and the abilities. I was not told based on an artist concept. So like the artist and I are working from the same information and reaching different conclusions. So you can't be nope, it's a bottle of ranch, because like my interpretation is exactly as valid.
But I did say, guess what the picture is. Anyway,
Do I not get to share my idea on this on Ranch?
Can you beat just a bottle of Hidden Valley Ranch dressing?
Not for like funnies, but I have an idea, darn it.
What's your idea?
All right, so in Sun and Moon, they introduce like a legendary that actually evolves.
Mm-hmm.
And like the base form of it is useless because it's going for kind of a Magikarp thing.
Right.
But it turns into like either a big moon bat or like a big sun lion.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's good. So my thinking is like keeping with the space. So in like the theoretical like Pokemon Eclipse, like the Emerald equivalent, like the third legendary is like space themed. You got to go to space. And so it does the similar thing where it evolves. And it goes from like Raunch, where it's like, you know, like it's in its launch phase, and it evolves into like a spaceship thing. I like mine just fine, thank you.
All I can do is breathe heavy sighs into the microphone. If you are interested in looking at these
I'm interested
fake
in looking at
Pokemon
them. Hand
for
me your
yourself.
phone. One of those is just a Digimon. I feel like this was done in poor
A Digimon
faith.
with a gun, Quinn.
I feel like this was done in poor faith.
And its name is Moi. If you're interested, head on over to nerdist.com. They have the full article. And then also Iguanamouth on Tumblr is the artist. We are going to take a quick music break, and then we're going to be back. And this week, we are talking about tabletop role-playing games. Talk to you soon. And we are back, and we're ready to talk about some tabletop role-playing games.
Yep, that is our main topic today, and so both of us have a fair bit of experience with that.
We do. We've both been on both sides of the tables for a couple of systems, actually.
Yeah. So to clarify that both sides of the table point, for those of you that are like complete novices to this, which some of you might be, some of the four of you.
My aunt, who listens regularly.
I went to like great lengths to prevent my mom from listening to this because she would be so disappointed in how much of a nerd I am.
Oh, God.
So the basic setup is typically like between 2 and 6 people sit on kind of metaphorically one side of the table and play characters. And these characters are kind of run through a series of scenarios and encounters by the dungeon master in like Dungeons and Dragons terms. But actually, the company that makes the World of Darkness line, White Wolf, calls that person the storyteller, which I think is more accurate to their job.
Yeah, and I mean, the generic word for it is the game master. You're making sure that the game runs smoothly. Generally, you've written the story if you're playing in a pre-written system, or you theoretically know the rules generally better than anyone else at the table.
Yeah, and you control all of the characters that aren't being played by the players.
Right.
And again, I really want to stress, I really like the White Wolf thing, because I feel like Dungeon Master fosters kind of an unnecessarily like adversarial setup.
Yeah, and that's something that Wizards of the Coast specifically in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, they run the big one.
Yeah, they're very, devote like half a page to being like, it's not the dungeon master against the players, you're all working together to tell a story, which is kind of part of the reason that I resist storytellers, because it's and this varies from table to table, but the story is as much in the player's hands as it is in the game master's hands.
Yeah. The idea is like the game master shows up with the bones of a story, and then with the players improv out all the details.
Right. But like with so the current session that we're playing,
I am the storyteller.
It's D&D. We have to use Dungeon Master.
We are in no way legally bound to use their terminology.
So Quinn is the Dungeon Master, and then I and a couple of our friends are the players, and we just completely zagged on you. And
it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun, but it also like totally redirected the story.
Oh, that's giving yourselves too much credit.
These are your words. We zagged
you totally
on you
redirected
hard.
that scene.
We did.
You handled that scene in a way I had not anticipated, but the resolution of that scene was still pretty much where the plot was going.
But like, so, I think it's a Maureen Johnson quote from a while back. She talks about, like having people will come up to her and say, I have this great idea for a story and I have it all planned out. I just haven't written it yet. And at that point, you don't have a story. You have a framework. The story comes in the telling. Yeah. And I think that the storytelling is the responsibility of everyone at the table. That's not the discussion we're here to have.
Okay.
What we are here to talk about is how much fun tabletop role-playing games are.
Yeah, so I said at the top of this, like, I have a fair bit of experience, and to a lot of people, that is just a lie. I've been playing since I got to college, basically, so 3-ish years.
About 3 years.
But it's been fairly intensive.
It has, yeah. We've been meeting pretty much every week.
A couple of different systems.
A couple of different campaigns and stories, sometimes concurrently.
Yeah.
We've had the occasional one-off.
And I started like building like a complete homebrew system, and you helped out a lot with that.
Yeah, and
I'm willing to give you like an editor credit on that one.
Aw, you're sweet. And the same in reverse. I've been building a system that you've been helping out on. But let's talk about D&D first.
Okay. The main one and kind of the starting point.
Yeah, the one you're probably most familiar with, the one that you can well, you can play a lot of these totally for free, legitimately.
Also, the one that had a really, really bad cartoon once.
Yeah,
check that
and
out.
a series of really, really bad movies as well. Oh, Dungeons and Dragons. But so one of the things that I really like about Dungeons and Dragons is that they have a very mechanically tight system, and the focus on development for them, you can really tell, rests in the mechanics.
Yeah,
and
they set out to, and I think especially in this edition did, give players and game masters like a set of tools that can be used to do about anything.
Yeah,
and do them well and consistently. I mean, that has some work to do on like exploration rules and stuff, but
yeah, definitely.
I think we're gonna get a book for that down the line. All the 15 ranger subclasses.
Oh gosh, yeah.
There are so many now.
Yeah. And you know, like I mentioned, it's very mechanics focused. Which
it definitely leaves the narrative structure and narrative style completely in the hands of the people at the table.
It does, to a much lesser extent than something like Dungeon World.
Big disagree there.
Well, see, for me, the thing about Dungeon World is like, here are some bare bones mechanics, and they're you know, as simple as possible, with the idea that you're rolling as little as possible, and not all the emphasis, but most of the emphasis is on the role play.
Right, it's very role play heavy, but my disagreement with you here is Dungeon World, like where Dungeons and Dragons gives you very robust tools with which to tell whatever kind of story. Dungeon World gives you very bare bones tools and a lot of rules for how your story will happen. None of them dictate like the events that occur, but there are so many like, and obviously you can choose to ignore any rules you want. No one's standing over your shoulder. But the type of story you're going to tell in Dungeon World is going to be very role play focused and going to be very modular, I guess is a word. It's designed for kind of a weird modular storytelling.
Yeah, that's fair. But I guess sort of where I'm coming from is that you could take a game of Dungeons and Dragons and just roll your way from start to finish in a way that Dungeon World certainly doesn't allow.
And that's what I'm saying is.
Yeah, and that's
Dungeon World locks you into a play style, and it's a good one. It's one I enjoy. But...
and I guess it places the emphasis much more on do good storytelling and have good role play, whereas you can play a bad campaign of Dungeons and Dragons.
See, like here's my thoughts on that. I know
let
I'm
me
talking
clarify.
a lot, but
you can play Dungeons and Dragons poorly and still have a successful game. If you play Dungeon World poorly, it's gonna fall apart.
Yeah, but like there are people that play Dungeons and Dragons, and it has, especially 4th edition, which is the one prior to the one they're currently publishing new stuff for. You could play that as just a tactical game, and it works. It's a pretty good like medieval combat tactical game. You can't do that with Dungeon World at all.
Yeah,
like there are more play styles available for D&D because their tool set is so much more robust. That's what I was saying.
Yeah,
because I don't think a D&D game with little role play is inherently playing it bad. I think it's playing it different. We don't really do that.
Yeah, well, and I'm thinking specifically of people that I've played with who like fall asleep on their boyfriend during session.
Yeah, okay,
like,
that's playing it bad.
But you can do that, and only your character can only exist when they're making a combat roll.
Yeah,
and you can still have a successful game of D&D.
Yeah, that's fair.
Whereas I don't think you could really do that. You certainly couldn't do that with Dungeon World. And I think
we've had people try.
But I think it's what draws me to Dungeon World at least is that kind of necessary engagement, and there's a lot of improv emphasis. Yeah,
and one thing that Dungeon World does really well is and the reason I like Storyteller is most of the like kind of the onus of the improv is on the game master. The players come up with improv and can kind of do whatever. Like there's no limitations on them in that way, other than like what the rules of the game are. The Dungeon Master has to respond to that. The Dungeon Master has to do reactive improv, which is I think much more difficult. And what Dungeon World does is by rulifying that, because it does in all the GM stuff, it gives you rules for how to respond to that. It makes it very easy to have an adaptive campaign that responds very well to your players.
Yeah.
It makes it very hard to tell the story you want to tell.
Yeah, and I think it definitely comes down to intent when you sit down to play.
Oh, yeah.
So we did a Dungeon World campaign. We've done two.
Yeah.
One where I DM'd a very loose interpretation of the Dungeon World rules because we had so many people at that table.
It got up to like 10 at one point, I think.
It got up to like 10 at one point.
That's too many people. Cap your parties at 5 people.
Yeah, or 6. I mean, just
6 is too
just
many.
know your table and know where to cap it. So the campaign that I ended up leading, we did have a story set out, and after about the first session we had a pretty good idea of what we were doing, and then it all fell apart, of course,
because we got the party too big.
We got the party too big, and consistency was a big problem.
Yeah. Well, that's, I think, the problem with a big party.
Yeah. I mean, it was the same people that were inconsistent when we had 4 people. God,
True.
we're just ragging on all of our friends today.
No, there are at least 2 of our friends that
we haven't ragged on.
Consistently good players.
And then so we have had the Dungeon World campaign that you
I ran.
did, where one of our players' sort of opening moves was like, stabbing a villager to death.
Yeah. And like part of what I set out to do with this one was set up, like, drop the players into a no-win-ish scenario and just see how they get out of it.
Right.
And because I'm intending to sit down and really use those like improv back and forth rules that Dungeon World is good at designing and setting up those situations. And I think it worked well because, you guys did something I was not at all expecting, which was violence to like a 14-year-old child.
I mean, to be fair, he was trying to kill us.
He was significantly misinformed.
He jumped out a window brandishing a pitchfork at me.
And you weren't the one that stabbed him.
And then one of our
handled
players,
it well.
One of our players responded to that very much in character and just
it was great.
Stabbed the poor guy. But it totally zagged the campaign.
It changed the whole tone of the situation they were in. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Dungeon World's great at responding to that. And we had like a good 3 sessions out of that?
Or more, 3 or 4.
Yeah.
It was pretty good.
And then we kind of stopped doing that one
because
just due to
moved.
Yeah,
logistics.
One of our players left Statesboro.
Yeah, and then to shift gears for a moment before we go to break to talk a little bit more about the mechanics themselves. So Dungeon World is what's called what Wizards calls the Roll20 system. Most of the time, if you're doing anything, you're rolling a d20, which is nice in that you have one die to keep track of, and it's pretty simple. But it also means that you always have like a 5% chance of failure because there's 10% because there's really nothing that can modify a 2 into a success until you get to level 20.
Yeah.
And then, but you also always have that 5% chance of success. And then Dungeon World, like we said, rolling as little as possible. And when you are rolling, you're rolling a D12.
Yeah.
Which you could effectively be rolling a D4 for most of it because you have 4 categories: fail, succeed with a bad qualification, succeed with a good qualification, succeed unqualified. Or I might have gotten those last 2 mixed up.
You did.
The point is, most of the time it's assumed that if your character has the skills that you're trying to use, you will use them successfully. If you're trying to do something like extra special, you have to roll for it.
Which most attacks count as that.
Right.
So you are still rolling a fair bit in combat,
yeah.
But that's just so that everybody's not like, okay, subtract your numbers.
Yeah.
So there is an element of randomness and dynamicness to it.
And then a couple of other systems that, I've seen played or played. One that I particularly like is Dread.
Yes, this is an oddball one.
Dread is, so it's single designed for a single session, and it's one of those
One
games.
thing I do want to clarify: a session here, for those of you that don't know, like 4-ish hours of sitting down to play a game.
Yeah.
At minimum, really.
Yeah, so like a game, well, I mean, you could truncate it depending on how tight your storytelling is.
Yeah, I wish I could keep you guys just all day, but
yeah, I mean, same. But so Will Wheaton on Tabletop has an episode of Tabletop where they play a game of Dread, and I think the uncut version of that is about 2 hours because the story is so tightly wound.
Dread goes faster than most.
Yeah. In large part because you either succeed or you pull a brick from the Jenga tower.
Yes, which is really weird. It's not a Jenga tower; it's a Dread tower.
Yes,
they can't call it a Jenga tower.
It is not a Jenga tower. It is.
It is in all ways identical to a Jenga tower,
except you've like sanded off the word Jenga.
Yes, basically.
So in the center of the table, you have your
Dread tower.
And if you're doing something that is outside of your character's wheelhouse or would require any sort of special success, you have to pull from the Dread tower. And
when it comes down,
you fail spectacularly.
And typically die, because it's kind of a horror game.
Typically die. It is called Dread. It is much a horror game.
I mean, you could certainly reformat it to be whatever.
Yeah.
But out of the box, you're supposed to be telling a horror story.
Yeah. And, you know, that's one of the greatest, because it's like not only a pass-fail mechanic, it is an absolutely brutal pass-fail mechanic.
Yeah, this is not a thing that you're going to keep characters alive through more than one session.
And that's part of why it's designed for a single session.
Yeah,
you know, if you have a character,
will die.
If you have a character alive at the end, they're probably insane or, you know, moving to like live in like a quiet New England suburb, never to be heard from or talk about their past again.
Yeah.
And then another one, there are two systems that are very similar, GURPS and the Age system.
Yeah, neither of which I have played.
Neither have I. I've seen them played a lot, and I've read up on them. But both of them involve rolling multiple dice. I don't know what either of them stand for. I think Age is like advanced gaming experience. I don't know. But both of them involve rolling more than one die. You're generally rolling 3d6 to pass or fail. And what I like about the 3d6 systems is that you're much more likely to get an average result. Yeah. So it's like, I would like to, you know, pick this lock, roll 3d6. You're much more likely to get, you know, like I actually think, like a 8, 9, 10, 11 in that kind of area. And much less likely to get, you know, a critical failure or a critical success. Yeah. And then also with the Age system, there's a thing called stunting. And so if you roll doubles, then you it's sort of like rolling a critical hit, and you get to do something cool.
There's like a Dragon Age one that uses that, I think.
Yep, Dragon Age, and then Titan's Grave is another setting for the Age system. Generally speaking, it's a really neat take on it that is, I think, a little friendlier to storytelling than D&D can be. Because in D&D, if you critically fail, there's nothing you can do about it, and you know, a good GM will spin that. But if you fail on like a 2 or a 3, you just kind of
don't do it.
You just kind of don't do it, and that can really tank your campaign and kill all of your characters.
Not that we've had that happen yet. But
not that we've had that happen yet. We've gotten close. But yeah, a system where you're rolling multiple dice just because of how things average out, you're much more likely to get a middle of the road roll, which is something that I'm a fan of. And for the same reason that I'm a big fan of Dungeon World, is that it puts the emphasis on storytelling and the narrative in a way that I think almost necessarily does that, in a way I think D&D doesn't as much.
So I bought a book that is the Firefly role-playing game based on the TV show. And by the way, if anyone listening to this wants to play that, please do. I don't have enough people to run a game yet.
Shoot us an email or a message over our Tumblr, both of which are z.q radio.
To clarify, if you go to Georgia Southern, because I don't want to do this online.
yeah. If you're a local friend.
Yeah, but so the way that works, to the best of my understanding, because it's been like a month since I've opened the book, is like you have a bunch of ways to add to a dice pool that you roll. And you roll anywhere from like minimum of 2, maximum of like I think 10 dice. And then you pick the 2 highest ones, and that's your roll. And ones like come back to bite you like in the next scene. Which is it's weird, and I want to try it.
It is really weird. Like the
I think that's maybe why I can't convince Zero to play with me.
Well, I mean, partially just because with, you know, a campaign running, it's like hard to get friends to sit down for like a game of like exploding kittens, which takes, you know, like 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Much less sit down for like a one-off role-playing game session, which probably is going to take 4 hours.
Yeah, but I want to play it.
Yeah, and eventually we will.
Okay.
But yeah, the dice pool mechanic is really like, it's interesting, and you know, it pretty much, because I don't think they use a D20 except for like pretty extravagant things.
I actually think it caps at a D12.
Yeah,
I don't think you can go above a 12.
Your roll caps at 24 if you're doing real good.
Yeah.
And so like it basically you're narrowing the pool and making it much more likely to have a sort of close race, which I think is, you know, very much in the spirit of the movie, because it's all or the TV show, because it's a lot of like close scrapes and barely getting by.
Yeah, the other thing is it looks like every single roll is a contest. Like you're rolling to beat someone else's dice pool. Like typically the GM, but not always.
Yeah.
Rather than to beat like a threshold, which keeps things very, very dynamic and randomized, while still keeping everybody in kind of a close race band. Which I think would work really well. I definitely think it would depend a lot on the GM. A GM that is out to kill people will be able to do it in 10 minutes in this system.
Yeah.
A GM that is sitting down to tell a story with players can probably keep them alive unless they actively try to commit suicide.
All right. We are going to take a quick break. And then when we get back, we're going to talk about some of the role-playing game systems that we have tried to write ourselves.
Yeah, that's going to be an adventure.
It will. But for now, we're going to go to a quick music break. Quinn, we are back.
We are.
And
time to like talk about ourselves, which is the best part of the show.
We're going to talk about ourselves some more, which is always the best part of the show. You want to go first? You want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay. So, being an avid fan of tabletop role-playing games, I, many moons ago, and by that I mean freshman year, decided to like try my hand at it, you know, myself. Yes, that's how that sentence works. You know, try my hand at it and see what I could come up with, and have been working on the same like 3 projects ever since.
Yeah, 3. What are the 3?
Well, you know, so there's whatever like campaign for D&D or whatever I'm writing at the time. Right now I'm doing one, Kaladesh themed one, which is Wizards of the Coast is the same people who do D&D and Magic the Gathering, and they occasionally release what they call plane shifts, which allows you to build a D&D campaign in a Magic the Gathering setting. And so I'm working on one of those, Kaladesh, which is like a steampunk pre-colonial India setting, which is really exciting. But yeah, so whatever session I'm running or writing at the time, there's that. But then there are a couple other ones. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Wizards of the Coast in the, you know, D&D Player's Handbook makes it very clear, or maybe it's the Dungeon Master's Guide, but they make it very clear that the Dungeon Master and the players are not enemies.
Right.
And so my idea was, of course, what if they were? Partially because I love asymmetrical gameplay.
You do. But you know Tomb of Horrors exists, right?
I do. But Tomb of Horrors is breaking D&D. Like, so the working title I had for this for a while was Panopticon.
Right, this one.
And like trying to figure out like, okay, how would a DM versus the players campaign go? And
it seems like the first conclusion is you have to impose a lot of rules on the GM. Because they don't have many in the base game.
Yeah, it's well, and more so than anything, it's giving the GM a lot of arbitrary powers. Limited, but are like very powerful, but very specific powers. Because the basic relationship that, you know, I wanted to keep intact was the GM knowing everything that the players know and the players knowing nothing that the GM knows.
Right.
Until the GM tells them. And so I wanted to keep that basic relationship intact. And so it involves giving the DM a lot of really powerful but very specific abilities that ultimately are you know, so situational that it gives the players a fighting chance. Which, you know, it's just more than anything, it was a fun experiment to kind of think about how that relationship would work out in a situation that wasn't just bludgeon your party over the head with monsters until they die.
Yeah, or the Tomb of Horrors option, which is conceal information so they kill themselves.
That too. And then another project that I've been working on,
and the one I am the most familiar with.
Yes, the Yogg is a video game. Came out a couple years ago by Damian Summers, and I can't remember the woman who did the art, and now I feel terrible. But it is basically a role-playing game where you guide one character through a series of turns doing different kind of predetermined tasks, and you know, you can chop wood in the forest, or you can work in the palace, or
and there's some kind of like emergent storyline gameplay stuff that happens.
Yeah, there's an emergent storyline, and there's a lot of random events. So you go and do whatever your job for that week is, and then you get a random event sort of in response. And how those play out affects your character's stats. And then the Yogg happens, and you have to respond to that. And I'm being very sensitive about spoilers here, because not knowing what the Yogg is changes your like first watch or listen or play experience pretty significantly, and I think for the better, you know.
Agreed. But like, suffice to say, a thing happens.
Yes, a thing,
and then you
happens,
get endings based on what you did
and then
prior.
You get endings. And don't bother, or don't worry about those sounds. It's just me Googling, because not remembering the woman who did the art was really bothering me. Damian Summers is the writer and developer. Emily Carroll did the art.
Okay.
She did a ton of absolutely beautiful art for this game.
Yeah, and there is a lot of it, because there are so many little endings and random events that are really tough to get that all have their own art.
Yes, and it is it's such a beautiful game, and it's so fantastic.
And it's a very quick play. Like, you can knock it out in like 10 minutes if you're going really quick.
I, at work this morning, played like 4 or 5 games with like a full cast. But I kind of wanted to develop a system based on this game that kept the same spirit intact, but dealt a lot more with, you know, what the Yogg is itself, and dealing with that in the aftermath. Because in the game itself, you have 6 weeks leading up to the Yogg, and then you just have kind of the after. And so I really wanted to dive a lot more into the Yogg and the after, and see how that could play out if played.
Yeah.
And you know, so added a whole bunch of, you know, different phases of the game. But, you know, keeping those same basic mechanics in place. And I really like it because it's a roll under system.
Yeah.
Which of course I did arbitrarily, because I like roll under systems.
You do.
But yeah, a roll under system is something that's really fun, because it's an inversion of the expected, and also it makes thresholds a lot simpler to understand.
It does.
But then of course, you know, I have to figure out different crit mechanics, and it's a really fun exercise in game making. I've really enjoyed working on it these past too many years. Like, it really should have been like I did it over 4 weeks in the summer, but I'll work on it for like 20 minutes once a month, and you know,
yeah,
that'll be it.
So those are kind of your projects, unless you had.
Well, and then there's the XCOM.
Oh, we've just discussed that. That's not really like a project, is
Yeah.
it?
Well,
You have stuff right now for it? Or-
I have like very basic, like,
Oh, okay.
yeah, not like any in depth, but basically playing off of the XCOM games and that, beautiful small number arithmetic that they use, turning that into a tabletop, and it hews much closer to a war game than
yes.
a proper tabletop
There's
role
very
playing
little role
game.
playing.
But where I really think I feel okay calling it a role playing game is that, unlike in XCOM, where each squad member is controlled by the same person, you have a plan going in, but each squad member is played by a different player.
Yeah. So it's a lot less eye in the sky, like isometric tactical, and a lot more like
Boots on the ground tactical.
Yeah.
And I think, allows for, sort of in between mission moments and, personal character growth and stuff like that.
And one of the things that I wanted to suggest about that is set up either a bunch of criteria or a mechanism for developing them on the fly so that you get like character moments that give you like very small mechanical bonuses, but come with like a character thing based on stuff that happens on missions. Because that's the thing I wish the games had.
Yeah, I can
they
dig that.
The expansion pack for the first one added it in the form of the medals. But
Yeah, well, and the thing I like so much, the kind of the conceit of the games is it's this hard as nails 6 to 8 hour roguelike. We got through without anyone dying.
Well, we played on easy because I was showing you the game.
And that was still a miracle.
Yes, it was still difficult.
It's very much form an emotional attachment to this character that's going to die next mission.
Yes.
And I think, especially since you have a lot of RPG systems that you have are either everyone will die by the end of this single session, or have these characters endure as long as possible. And I feel like it really is a balance of that, where you have death more frequently without it being the entire game, without having to tell a horror story. And then again, the XCOM games just use really pretty small number arithmetic.
Well, the first one does, certainly.
Yeah, the first one does.
Not for the first of the reboot.
Yeah.
Because the original first one is the furthest from small number arithmetic that games in the 90s got. I tried my hand at that one. It is blisteringly complex and not fun.
All right, Quinn, you've been working on one project consistently, in which with much more focus and effort than I have on any of my projects.
Also since freshman year, actually.
Also since freshman year. And we've actually been able to play test this one a little bit.
Yeah, we did some playtesting freshman year, and then that was like version 1.0. Now we're on version like 3.1.
Yep.
It's also an adaptation of a video game, and it's Fallout, the big Bethesda open world shoot 'em up, the post-apocalypse thing. And there exists a tabletop system for Fallout, but it's really bad. In my opinion, it involves percent dice.
It involves like all percent dice. It's not just like the occasional percent die roll.
Yeah, like to me, it seems like they just transposed the game engine from like the original games, which were like 90s games, with the numbers that implies into dice, and it's rough.
Yeah, and like Fallout 1 and 2, it's very complicated. A lot of like percent chance to hit and stuff, and it just...
Well, I mean, the later games have that too, but it's kept very under the hood.
Right.
And player skill plays a bigger role.
And in the first couple games, it's pretty bare bones, and I think that's definitely translates into that system. Whereas the system you're designing is much more elegant.
On a Roll20 system, basically. It would play similarly to D&D, with the biggest differences, I think, being in character design.
Right.
So in D&D, you play like distinct classes. You play the cleric or the fighter or the wizard.
Or the monk.
Or the monk. There's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But they have like roles that they are pretty set. And you can modify them a lot. But, you're never going to have like a punchy wizard.
Yeah. Or if you do, you're doing something very wrong.
You're going to die real quick.
Yeah.
The thing I'm focusing on in my Fallout game is advancement comes through skill allotment, not like getting powers as you level up as much.
Right.
You get some of those because Fallout has like a perk system.
Right.
But you get to pick those. Like you get to pick what powers you get at level up, and you get to pick where you do your skill allotments. So there's no classes. So you would have you could have somebody who's like really good at, medic and like the medic skill
and engineering and laser weapons.
Yeah, which would seem to be a class, but you could also do medic and like grenades.
Yeah, it's definitely like the single most flexible system in character design I think I've ever seen.
Which is my goal setting it, because that's what you can do in the game. You specialize in at character creation anyway, 3 of like 20-ish skills, depending on the game.
And then that really determines how you play and the story you get.
But the skills don't have any relationship to each other. So you can be good at 3 very like things that are very distant from each other. Yeah. Unlike in D&D, where if you're a cleric, you're pretty much good at wisdom, religion-y stuff.
Yeah, and
like no matter what else you try to do with that character.
Yeah, you're going to be pretty locked into whatever your sort of central ability for that class is, which in 5e, they're all wisdom. They're all wisdom. If you're a caster, you're either a wizard or casting with wisdom. And if
there's a lot of charisma casters too. There's just not enough intelligence casters.
It's just not like spread out at all, which is a little bit frustrating.
Still miss my Constitution caster. That's the thing I like.
Yeah, that would
Magic Barbarian should be Constitution casters.
Yeah, that would give you something to do with Constitution other than get hit points, which I think is my one real complaint about like 5e. Constitution does one thing,
but you need it. It's a necessary thing, but it doesn't add anything fun. One thing
that you absolutely have to have, or you'll die first session.
So like that's part of what I'm doing, and getting into the whole and I know we're a little over time, but as far as like getting into it with a little more focus and dedication than your projects, perhaps it is a feat of hubris on the level of like Greek legends. The amount of stuff I'm trying to do with this. Like I've designed a bestiary for it that's going to have like over 100 creature types, each with like flavor text and multiple stat blocks for different kind of levels.
And I mechanics checked your bestiary with over 100 different types of creatures.
And then I rewrote I'm rewriting the whole thing, and I've almost doubled the number. It went from about 80 to about
160 would be double.
Well, yeah, but it was like 150 something.
And so I'll have to do it all again.
You will. That's what you signed on for by being my roommate.
Yeah, that's fair.
I would be running this by, like, even if I had just random roomed, just like some guy who's never played a tabletop game. Look at this. Does this look balanced? So I'm doing that. I've got like a whole combat engine that's similar to D&D, but pretty much ground up on me. Again, the character system is based heavily on the Fallout games, but not at all on their tabletop system. So I'm doing a lot. I'm trying to design like a full game and also write like a setting for it. And it will be a decade before this thing is complete.
Yeah, well, it's good to have goals.
Yeah.
I will say, my favorite thing about the Fallout system is that I get to play as a giant purple man.
Yeah, you can play as a giant purple shouty man.
Which is always fun. And it definitely, like, I think, codifies a lot of the, like, quirkiness that you can get with D&D, but by no means are required to mechanically. And, that's part of the fun of the game, is having, like, characters with absurd personalities crashing against each other.
Yeah, and, like, with Fallout especially, it's known for its zany sense of humor.
Yeah, that is a basic, like, function of the game.
Yeah. So I tried to include that as much as possible. Yeah. And you liked it based on the character you made.
I did. I liked it based on the 7-foot shouty purple man I made.
That knows about presidents.
It has a comprehensive knowledge of all of the presidents of the United States up until the end of the United States.
Yes.
All right. That is our show for this week. As always, you can find us, I guess not as always, as of recently.
Yes, this is a new
You can find us at youtube.com. We don't have a custom URL yet because we don't have enough subscribers. But we're on YouTube. Our channel is z.qradio. You can email us at z.qradio at gmail.com. You can message us and find links to all of our shows in our show notes at z.qradio. No, I think our Tumblr is just z.q. No, it is. Look at me, not even knowing what I'm talking about. At z.qradio at tumblr.com. Well, z.qradio.tumblr.com. Got there eventually. Let us know if you have ideas for upcoming shows, if you're interested in playing a role-playing game with us, any of our local friends.
Because we're always down for that.
We're always down for it. And then just if you have any general comments about the show. All right. Do you want to give us our sign off this week, Quinn?
I feel like I was stepping on your toes. I don't want to do that.
Aw, that's so sweet and considerate. Well, until next week, enjoy something.